Suffering is an inevitable part of human existence. It is also a catalyst for awakening, transformation, and compassion. In this video, we will explore the various dimensions of suffering from different philosophical and spiritual perspectives, and offer some practical suggestions on how to transcend suffering in our lives. Life is suffering, said Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. This may sound pessimistic, but it is actually a realistic and pragmatic observation of the nature of reality. The Buddha taught that suffering, or dukkha, is the result of our ignorance, craving, and aversion. He also taught that there is a way to end suffering by following the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths are: 1. The truth of suffering. All conditioned phenomena are unsatisfactory, impermanent, and subject to change. 2. The truth of the origin of suffering. Suffering is caused by our attachment to desire, which leads to clinging and grasping. 3. The truth of the cessation of suffering. Suffering can be ended by letting go of attachment and desire, which leads to liberation and peace. 4. The truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. The way to end suffering is to practice the Eightfold Path, which consists of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These teachings are relevant and applicable to our modern challenges, such as stress, anxiety, depression, loneliness, violence, injustice, and environmental degradation. By understanding the causes and conditions of our suffering, we can learn to transform our mindsets, behaviors, and relationships, and create more happiness and harmony for ourselves and others. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is attachment, or tanha, which means thirst, craving, or desire. He said, "The root of suffering is attachment. The root of attachment is ignorance. The root of ignorance is the notion of self." This means that we suffer because we cling to things that are impermanent and illusory, such as our body, mind, possessions, relationships, or status. We also suffer because we do not see the true nature of reality, which is interdependent, empty, and impermanent. We also suffer because we identify with a separate and fixed self, which is a source of ego, pride, and delusion. The Buddha also taught that the way to end suffering is to practice non-attachment, or anatta, which means no self, or selflessness. He said, "The end of suffering is non-attachment. The end of non-attachment is wisdom. The end of wisdom is nirvana." This means that we can end suffering by letting go of our attachment to things that are impermanent and illusory, and by seeing the true nature of reality, which is interdependent, empty, and impermanent. We can also end suffering by realizing that there is no separate and fixed self, but rather a dynamic and fluid process of interbeing, which is a source of compassion, joy, and freedom. The Buddha also taught that the path to end suffering is to follow the middle way, or Majjhima Patipada, which means the middle path or the balanced path. He said the middle way is the path that avoids the extremes of indulgence and asceticism. The middle way is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering and the attainment of enlightenment. This means that we can end suffering by practicing moderation, harmony, and wisdom in all aspects of our life, such as our thoughts, words, actions, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Suffering is not only an individual phenomenon, but also a collective one. It affects not only ourselves, but also others and the whole world. Therefore, it is important to explore the societal perspectives on suffering and how they can help us to address the root causes and the solutions of suffering at the global level. Confucius was a Chinese philosopher and teacher who lived in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE. He advocated a system of ethical and moral principles that aimed to create social harmony and human excellence. He said, "Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire." This is the golden rule of Confucianism, which expresses the principle of reciprocity, or shu, which means empathy, consideration, or altruism. Confucius emphasized the importance of social harmony and collective responsibility, which are based on the concepts of ren, li, and xiao. Ren means humaneness, benevolence, or goodness, which is the highest virtue and the essence of humanity. Li means ritual, propriety, or etiquette, which is the code of conduct and the norms of behavior that regulate social interactions and relationships. Xiao means filial piety, loyalty, or devotion, which is the respect and obedience that one owes to one's parents, elders, ancestors, and superiors. Confucius believed that suffering is caused by the lack of harmony and responsibility in society, which leads to chaos, conflict, and corruption. He also believed that suffering can be ended by restoring harmony and responsibility in society, which leads to order, peace, and justice. He said, "If the people are led by laws and uniformity sought to be given them by punishments, they will try to avoid the punishment, but have no sense of shame. If they are led by virtue and uniformity sought to be given them by the rules of propriety, they will have the sense of shame, and moreover will become good." These teachings are relevant and applicable to our modern challenges, such as inequality, discrimination, violence, and injustice. By understanding the causes and conditions of our societal suffering, we can learn to transform our values, attitudes, and behaviors, and create more harmony and responsibility for ourselves and others. Ecological thinking is a way of perceiving and relating to the world that recognizes the interdependence of all life and the interconnection of all systems, such as the biosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the geosphere. It is inspired by the insights of science, such as ecology, biology, physics, and chemistry, as well as the wisdom of indigenous cultures, such as Native Americans, Aboriginal Australians, and Amazonian tribes. Ecological thinking emphasizes the importance of interdependence and interconnection, which are based on the concepts of holism, diversity, and balance. Holism means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that every part affects and is affected by the whole. Diversity means that the variety and complexity of life forms and systems enriches and sustains the whole. Balance means that the dynamic equilibrium and harmony of life forms and systems maintains and restores the whole. Ecological thinking believes that suffering is caused by the lack of interdependence and interconnection in the world, which leads to exploitation, destruction, and extinction. Ecological thinking also believes that suffering can be ended by restoring interdependence and interconnection in the world, which leads to conservation, restoration, and regeneration. Arne Naess, a Norwegian philosopher and environmentalist, said, "The world is not a resource for us to consume, but a community to which we belong." These teachings are relevant and applicable to our modern challenges, such as environmental degradation, climate change, biodiversity loss, and resource depletion. By understanding the causes and conditions of our ecological suffering, we can learn to transform our values, attitudes, and behaviors, and create more interdependence and interconnection for ourselves and all life. "The mind is everything. What you think you become," said Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. This is a powerful statement that reveals the potential for transformation through conscious choices. Our thoughts shape our reality, and our reality shapes our experience. Therefore, by choosing our thoughts wisely, we can create a positive and meaningful experience for ourselves and others. One of the ways to exercise the power of choice and intention is to set clear and realistic goals for ourselves and to align them with our values and vision. By doing so, we can create a sense of direction and motivation and focus our energy and attention on what matters most to us. We can also monitor our progress and celebrate our achievements and learn from our challenges and failures. Another way to exercise the power of choice and intention is to reframe our challenges and difficulties as opportunities and lessons. By doing so, we can shift our perspective from victimhood and helplessness to empowerment and resilience. We can also cultivate a growth mindset and a positive attitude, and embrace change and uncertainty as part of life. A third way to exercise the power of choice and intention is to practice gratitude and appreciation for what we have and what we are. By doing so, we can increase our happiness and well-being and reduce our stress and dissatisfaction. We can also foster a sense of abundance and generosity and share our gifts and talents with others. The meaning of life is not something to be discovered, it is something to be created, said Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He developed a therapeutic approach called logotherapy, which is based on the premise that the primary motivation of human beings is to find meaning and purpose in life. He also argued that suffering can be a source of meaning and purpose, if we can find a positive and constructive way to cope with it. One of the ways to find meaning and purpose through suffering is to discover our personal values and to live according to them. Our values are the principles and standards that guide our actions and decisions and reflect our core beliefs and convictions. By identifying and clarifying our values, we can create a sense of identity and integrity and align our life with what is truly important and meaningful to us. Another way to find meaning and purpose through suffering is to engage in purposeful activities and to contribute to something greater than ourselves. Our purpose is the reason and the goal for our existence, and the impact and the legacy that we want to leave behind. By finding and pursuing our purpose, we can create a sense of fulfillment and significance and make a positive difference in the world. A third way to find meaning and purpose through suffering is to connect with a larger purpose and to transcend our ego and self-interest. Our larger purpose is the ultimate and universal purpose that we share with all beings and the source and the destination of our existence. By connecting and aligning with our larger purpose, we can create a sense of awe and wonder and experience a deeper and higher level of consciousness. Suffering is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that requires a holistic and integrative approach to understand and overcome. In this video, we have explored some of the philosophical and spiritual perspectives on suffering from the Buddhist, Confucian, and ecological viewpoints. We have also offered some practical suggestions on how to cope with and transcend suffering in our lives, such as mindfulness, meditation, equanimity, harmony, responsibility, humanity, interconnectedness, and balance. The key takeaways from this multifaceted perspective on suffering are: suffering is an inevitable and universal part of human existence, but it is also a catalyst for awakening, transformation, and compassion. Suffering has various dimensions and levels, such as physical, emotional, existential, and societal, and each of them requires a different approach and solution. Suffering can be ended by letting go of our attachment and ignorance, and by seeing the true nature of reality, which is interdependent, empty, and impermanent. Suffering can be reduced and alleviated by creating harmony and responsibility in society, and by practicing humaneness, propriety, and filial piety. Suffering can be shared and supported by fostering humanity and interconnectedness in the world, and by practicing empathy, solidarity, and care. Suffering can be transformed and transcended by restoring interdependence and interconnection with all life, and by practicing conservation, restoration, and regeneration. The call to action from this multifaceted perspective on suffering is to cultivate individual and collective well-being in harmony with universal principles, and to create a life of harmony and compassion for ourselves and others. This is not only a moral duty, but also a spiritual opportunity and a human potential. By doing so, we can fulfill our purpose and meaning in life and attain the ultimate goal of enlightenment and liberation. As a final note, I would like to share with you a quote from the Metta Sutta, a Buddhist scripture that teaches the practice of loving kindness, or metta, which is the wish for the happiness and well-being of all beings. It says, "May all beings be happy, may all beings be free from suffering. This is my wish for you and for all beings."